made huge economic and democratic advances, huge progress since that awful, horrific genocide there 22 years ago. And yet, nevertheless, today, a plethora of international human rights groups line up to issue report after report criticising the human rights situation in your country. Human Rights Watch says your government, quote, does not tolerate dissent. It's documented arbitrary arrests, unlawful detentions, enforced disappearances. Amnesty International says Rwandan journalists, human rights defenders, members of the opposition face a repressive environment. As the foreign minister, as the face of your government abroad, do such regular criticisms embarrass you, make you uncomfortable?
No, the criticism that Rwanda receives partly comes from misunderstanding where Rwanda is trying to go. Everybody knows Rwanda's history and the genocide and the recovery, but we've made some choices as a nation and as a country that are not typical, that fit our own desires that we have for our country. And so, for example, Rwanda has opted, and Rwandans, because this was a very consultative process, to go for not confrontational but consensual politics. And so, you know, right there, when there is no confrontation and big fights in politics, then there is, you know, there are critics who think that there is repression and people cannot speak up, but those were really our choices from the beginning.
Locking people up without trial, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, that's not consensus politics. Those are human rights abuses. Well, documented by human rights groups and by even friends of yours.
Look, if you pick any country,
yes,
not just Rwanda, you can pick human rights issues.
But we're talking about
everywhere.
Rwanda today because you're the foreign. I've interviewed foreign ministers from other countries.
Sure.
I'm asking about Rwanda, when human rights groups, you know, it's you know, the rankings aren't great. Reporters Without Borders ranks Rwanda 161 out of 180 countries when it comes to press freedom. It says in its most recent report that censorship is ubiquitous in Rwanda, and journalists who, quote, dare to criticize the government risk imprisonment or exile.
I've always wanted to know specifics about these cases. When you pick a country and say there are abuses of human rights, there is no freedom, there are no liberties, exactly what? Because it's important to go through these.
They mention the specifics. All the newspapers that are shut, journalists who are arrested, who have had to flee the country, the director of Christian Radio, the managing editor of the Rushesha newspaper, 2 women from the University of Rwanda radio station arrested for broadcasting material deemed offensive to the president. BBC Radio banned because it was accused of promoting genocide ideology. The BBC accused of promoting genocide ideology. Seriously?
Yes, absolutely. The BBC produced a documentary film, which is a total denial of the history of Rwanda, particularly the history of the genocide. So in Rwanda, that is not acceptable. In the UK, maybe that's a different story.
I mean, look, the BBC can defend themselves. I think most people would question the BBC being genocide promoters. But it's not just the Reporters Without Borders.
The BBC refused to come to Rwanda and defend itself. We invited the BBC. It did not want to come and explain.
OK, but it's not just the BBC or Amnesty or Human Rights Watch or Reporters Without Borders. Governments who are allies of yours, friends of yours, the United States, for example, the US State Department said in a statement a couple of years ago it was deeply concerned by the arrest and disappearance of dozens of Rwandan citizens, people held incommunicado, and by, quote, credible reports that individual journalists had been threatened by the authorities. That's the US government, that's your ally.
There is nothing unusual about governments and allies disagreeing on things. The United States is indeed an ally of Rwanda. We've worked together for many years, but every now and then we disagree on certain things, on the way we do business, just as we find some of the practices in the United States not the way it would be done in Rwanda. So we respect that. We want to keep improving on any front, economic or political. But it's absolutely normal to have countries disagree with what Rwanda does.
So you're willing to take their aid money, but reject their criticism of your human rights?
Well, first of all, let's say that aid is not charity. And aid money that has come to Rwanda has been used effectively. We can account as a government for every dollar that comes into
Fair
our
enough.
country.
No one was suggesting otherwise in
Now,
this particular... I'm
so
just making the point that
whatever-
these are your allies saying this stuff. You've got the US government, you've even got your own fellow African government. South Africa expelled 3 Rwandan diplomats in 2014 after an attack on the home of an exiled Rwandan dissident, which came 3 months after the killing of the Rwandan former intelligence chief in Johannesburg, found strangled in his hotel room.
But you know that case has not been investigated. At least the results are not out. So I don't know.
But the South Africans think you were behind it. They kicked out 3 of your diplomats.
Well,
they didn't do that for no reason.
That would have to be adjudicated, and a court would have to decide on that. So as long as it's not decided, my government is not to be accused of anything.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that they're guilty of anything. I said the South Africans seem to think you were involved. That's all I'm saying. You would agree with that?
That's a way of justifying the question that you were posing.
No, it's a way of pointing out to you that you're on your own page. Everyone seems to not agree with you when it comes to these issues. Rwanda seems to be on its own.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Rwanda, as any other country that I know of, has its own way of doing things, and not everybody should be agreeing with what the government of Rwanda is doing.
Should everyone agree when the Rwandan defense minister said in relation to that murdered former intelligence chief, when you choose to be a dog, you die like a dog? President Kagame himself said, whoever betrays the country will pay the price, will face negative consequences. That's not your government basically nudging and winking that they were behind those killings?
Let me again put it this way. I don't know anybody who betrays a country that gets rewarded. Let me just put it this way.
Okay, but when you say you choose to be a dog, you die like a dog, is that an appropriate thing to say? Some might say that sounds like a gang leader, not a national leader.
When somebody comes after my country and threatens the security of my country.
Well, he's from your country, with respect. He was a former intelligence chief of your president.
Absolutely. So whomever it is.
He's a Rwandan.
If you threaten my country...
Did he threaten your country, the former
Yes, he did, absolutely.
Was he prosecuted?
Yes, he did.
What was he prosecuted for?
He absolutely did. No, we're talking about what he did.
I'm asking for what he was prosecuted
What he did is he allied himself with militias that were attacking Rwandans and throwing grenades in Rwanda.
Was he prosecuted for that? What was he prosecuted for?
Who was supposed to prosecute
Moments
him?
ago, you told me that Rwandan government can't be accused of anything because it's not been adjudicated in a court of law. What was this former intelligence chief found guilty of in a court of law?
The government of Rwanda approached the government of South Africa to have this man extradited for trial.
Agreed, but he wasn't tried.
That
so
never
according to your criteria, if Rwanda's innocent of crimes because it's never been found guilty in a court of law, this man is also innocent of crimes.
But it's not.
I'm just using your logic,
It's not
Minister.
the government of Rwanda that refused to extradite him for trial.
But you agree he wasn't
We
actually...
didn't. We
but you agree he was convicted of no crime.
We asked for him to be extradited.
But you agreed he was convicted of no crime. We agree on that. He was convicted of no crime.
How can he be convicted when he's not allowed to face trial, which is
and yet you're
what
celebrating
Rwanda
his death.
wanted?
Fair enough. And yet you're celebrating the death of a man who was convicted of nothing.
Why should I be unhappy about my enemies and people who threaten...
Well, we don't know who threatened because he hasn't been tried, as you pointed out. A few years ago, your boss, President Kagame, told the Financial Times in an interview that I don't think anybody out there in the media, the UN, human rights organizations, has any moral right whatsoever to level any accusations against me or against Rwanda. Many would say that those are the words not just of authoritarian, that's quite megalomaniacal. I am above criticism. No one should criticize me.
What the president is saying is what he believes. President Kagame is a very accountable man, and everything he's done for Rwanda is out in the open. He's a man who's done extraordinary things for Rwanda. And he's also, if you know President Kagame, a man who doesn't hide or do things in the background. He's been totally accountable.
Why has he supported a constitutional amendment that was just passed, which effectively gives former presidents of Rwanda exemption from prosecution? Given the increasing level of criticism of your government, we've talked about some of the countries and groups that have criticised President Kagame, was it wise for him to support that constitutional amendment, which also allowed him to run now for a third 7-year term?
President Kagame has responded to what the people of Rwanda wanted, and there is nothing wrong with that.